Bitcoin has turned another corner as its value exceeded that of gold for the first time on a dollar-for-dollar value basis. So what? Well, this may not in itself be important, but what may be of more importance and doubtless is possibly behind the rise in Bitcoin's value is an event that is scheduled to take place at the US Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday the 13th of March, where a decision will be made on whether to allow the Winklevoss Trust to initiate the first US Bitcoin ETF, or Exchange Traded Fund. Michael Hudson is founder and CEO of Bitstocks, and he joins us now with some more analysis. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much.
First of all, what's your interest in blockchain or Bitcoin?
Well, my interest pretty much stems from my background, a very tech-centric background, very financial-centric background, and Bitcoin for me ticks a lot of boxes. For the first time ever, we have a financial system which has neutrality as a core feature. And considering that the majority of the world's population cannot interact with our financial system for a variety of different reasons, Bitcoin is a tool that allows people to interact directly with a financial system on the same equal level playing field as, say, you and I, being in the UK. That's what I found very appealing about Bitcoin's technology.
And what's your business model? Because you have clients that buy and sell Bitcoin, that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say first and foremost, we're an education firm. So what our job and what my job was to set out and do was provide a means and a platform where investors can literally just pick up the phone, ask all the basic questions that you need to offload as an investor before you even dream about allocating capital towards this, because Bitcoin is very, very confusing. If you speak to, say, an engineer, they'll give you a very technical, jargon-filled breakdown as to what Bitcoin's all about, but they might not necessarily really cover the financial side or understand the economic side to what Bitcoin is. You speak to a financial professional, not due to any form of malice or any deliberate means, but they might give you a very biased view as to what their interpretation of what Bitcoin is, but then they don't necessarily understand the technical side of things. And then even if you cover both bases, you also have to factor in the political influences that Bitcoin also has as well. So what we do as a company is we encompass what we call these three core pillars, make it palatable to a warehouse manager or a hedge fund manager, and then we guide you through that process and get you access to the market. We've got a separate side of the business. People are very au fait with Bitcoin, want to get access to Bitcoin in a safe way outside of traditional exchanges, and we can facilitate that side too.
Okay, so clearly you're steeped in the subject. In that case, let me put this to you, this question about the value of Bitcoin in this ETF. Is there a connection here? Has the value of Bitcoin risen because we are getting this decision? Aside of what the decision may end up as, is it because the ETF possibility is in the wind, or has Bitcoin got a life of its own in that upward direction anyway?
Bitcoin most certainly has a life of its own, right? So there's been many different events within Bitcoin that has led up to its scaling in value, okay? The ETF is a huge driver to recent price activity. I'll say majority retail investor driven, leading up to the anticipation of this decision and the outcome. Really and truly, if Bitcoin, the ETF is actually approved, we could very quickly see $2,000 a Bitcoin. That's very appealing to retail investors who want to make ultimately a good return. But equally, people should also err a lot of caution in the fact that I would argue actually a lot of institutional money is sitting on the sidelines right now for very good reason, because we want confirmation as to what this decision is going to be. At best, I will argue probably 50-50 this decision is going to be. And if I was really going to put my name towards where I see this going, I would say there might be a slight bias that I might feel that this could get declined. So I just urge that investors, irrespective of which side of the camp that you're on, you err with a large degree of caution.
My understanding is the Winklevoss brothers is just one proposal, the other one coming from SolidX Partners and Grayscale. So there's a bit of a momentum going behind this. What gives you the thought that the SEC might err on caution? And if they do err on caution, is it just a question of waiting for Bitcoin to become more acceptable generally and a more sizable pool of Bitcoin availability before they do make the decision to say, yes, we'll go for the ETF application?
I think their caution is warranted, but it's mostly due to the fact that this has never been done before, right? Now, we have a new form of system where it has a completely different governance model. So in Bitcoin and in cryptocurrencies, if the community divides and a large portion of the community wants to go into one direction, after consensus has been achieved, in Bitcoin's case, we need 95% consensus before we really do some huge changes. But if we did actually decide to go in a different direction, the community divided and split, what you'll have is the traditional Bitcoin chain being supported by the wider network. And then you have a group of individuals who prefer the original Bitcoin chain and they want to support that version of Bitcoin. So what you will ultimately have is money on two different chains. So let's just say, for instance, that you own 100 Bitcoins. You will own 100 Bitcoins on both chains. That doesn't mean that they will have equal and identical monetary value. They won't, more than likely or not, they won't. There's been already a case where this has happened with a cryptocurrency called Ethereum. Ethereum now, if I'm not mistaken, has a market cap of 1.7 billion. And then you have Ethereum Classic, which the part of the community decided to support, which now has a market cap of 124 million. Large disparity between the values, but ultimately they originate from the same project. So what happens with the Winklevoss trust if this event happens? Would these amount of Bitcoins be included into that ETF? How have they factored in for that? And I believe that has been one of the points of interest for the SEC.
What's the market cap of Bitcoin at the moment then?
I believe just $20 billion right now. So we're at $20 billion.
Okay, and of course that grows every time it's mined and so forth. And I think you've got to, it's possible to access that on the internet, isn't it? Let me just quickly go back to one other angle of this, because there is the China angle, because my understanding is the Chinese authorities are very suspicious about Bitcoin. And do you think the SEC might actually have one eye on what overseas bodies, authorities might consider to be the SEC obviously doesn't want to get dragged down a path by saying, by implication, if they authorise this and China says Bitcoin's a fraud, then the SEC obviously is partaking in that fraud. Do you think there's any element of that in the SEC decision ultimately? They're going to be looking at how China views it?
Not necessarily, not in my opinion. I don't think even in China it's a case of, is Bitcoin a fraud? In China, they have very strict...
Okay, maybe it's the right way to say that it facilitates fraud, it facilitates laundering. I think that's one thing I think that the Chinese have said. Is that not right?
Well, Bitcoin is a very neutral platform. Therefore, it will facilitate whoever likes to process a transaction via the network. It has no bias. So technology does tend to reflect society. A very layman's example, when the full transit van was first invented, who brought it first? The criminals, because it handled like a car, right? But you won't demonize, say, your average electrician because he's driving a full transit van. So in China, it's the fact that in their local environment, they want to have very strict capital controls for their own reasons, right? So there's $50,000 limit per annum that you can actually send out the country. People were circumventing those measures by utilizing Bitcoin to send as much money in and out the country as they liked, as easily as sending an email. They were exerting their right in order to do so. It wasn't illegal, they were just exerting their right through this tool in order to do so. So what the Chinese have done is they've come into the exchanges now and laid down some rule sets that prevents this being so easily done. All that has shown is, yes, you have hindered the on-ramps and the off-ramps, which is what governments, banks, etc. can do very, very easily. But what you can't then do is completely shut down Bitcoin, because what they've shown and demonstrated in China is that instead of going to your traditional exchanges where all the liquidity once was, they will go to peer-to-peer means. And what we've seen is there's a platform called Local Bitcoins, which volumes has gone up 5 times ever since China cracked down on their own exchanges. So that is a lesson worth learning as well. If you apply pressure in one point and it just redispersed to other areas, then is it really worth applying the pressure in that way in the first place? I think Japan's taken a slightly different approach, a little bit more of a mature approach. They've decided to legitimize Bitcoin and advocate it and help big businesses do it in the right way and adhere to ultimately proper rule sets. Because I think one of the most frustrating things about Bitcoin right now, my firm is no exception to this, is that we are being ultimately forced to operate in what is considered as a grey area. And then we have to try and pull out the blacks and the white from this grey area and hope that we get it right. And I'm sure this is something that the Winklevoss twins are feeling right now. They're thrown into a grey area and they're trying to pull out the whites and the blacks. And the SEC is trying to do the exact same thing right now. It's very, very difficult to do that. So there needs to be a standard. Everyone needs to have open dialogue and everyone needs to keep an open mind. I don't think one country is going to be the one who leads the world on everything else. We just need to have an open dialogue, be reasonable about this, and also factor in that we cannot hinder this innovation. And that's a very important point as well.
Can't get in the way of a market.
No, you really can't.
Michael, it's a pleasure. Thanks indeed for joining us. Michael Hudson is founder and chief executive of Bitstocks, and we're looking forward to that announcement from the Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday, the 13th of March.